designed to halt the wave of foreclosures hitting the United States population, while at the same time reinstituting the types of banking and financial controls which are necessary for the development of human economy.
I want to speak on an issue that actually has national and international implications.
I'd like to call attention to a piece of emergency firewall legislation that's currently circulating the United States.
For the Homeowners and Bank Protection Act.
I am a full-time political organizer for the LaRouche Political Action Committee.
I also work for the LaRouche Political Action Committee.
I am also with the LaRouche Political Action Committee organizing for the Homeowners and Bank Protection Act.
We're right now in the midst of a national mobilization.
Right now, the financial ash is falling on our heads.
Huge losses.
We're looking at nationwide millions of homeowners being foreclosed on.
People typically aren't aware that 60% of the assets of all the banks in the United States are tied up in this housing bubble, so it does mean a financial collapse.
The Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, and other central banks have thus far had a policy of providing whatever liquidity was necessary to plug the holes in banks' balance sheets.
The exact same process that was done in Germany in 1923. When you had a hyperinflationary blowout there.
This is something which is systemic. It's a global problem.
The good news is we have a solution.
The proposal that Lyndon LaRouche has made,
the Homeowners and Bank Protection Act.
The Homeowners and Bank Protection Act.
And take action by passing a resolution in support of the Homeowners and Bank Protection Act of 2007.
So these are the three provisions within the Act. The three main points of the legislation in terms of freezing foreclosures, setting up a system of rental payments, and a transition period where the banks can be recapitalized to actually begin to fund infrastructure projects and other productive investments.
For the federal government to freeze these foreclosures, as we had done in 1933 under President Franklin Roosevelt.
Rewrite mortgages, and this is the big one, rewrite mortgages to the fair value of the home. Not just changing the interest rate, change the principal in it.
One thing we have to do, it's inevitable, is to re-regulate the banking system.
Congress must establish a federal agency to place the federal and state chartered banks under protection.
State governors shall assume the administrative responsibilities for implementing the program, including the rental assessments to designated banks, with the federal government providing the necessary credits and guarantees to assure the successful transition.
What we have proposed is only a re-proposal of something that Mr. President Franklin Roosevelt did.
That's the kind of policy and orientation that Lyndon LaRouche represents. That's what the Homeowners and Bank Protection Act represents. It will be the first step declaring we're in a crisis and declaring that the number one constitutional obligation is to protect the U.S. population, keep society stable in the face of an economic crisis. And then from there, we need to move with a shift in policy nationally away from a system of globalization and cheap labor and back towards investment in making the United States a productive part of the world economy once again.
Send a message to Congress.
Use the power of government to protect populations during a chaotic economic crisis.
I've recently returned from Washington, D.C., where I am lobbying Congress on behalf of this policy. But if you look on the back of the sheet we passed out, you'll see support from across the nation.
To create a groundswell in the country.
They're banding together to fight for the general welfare of the nation. That's the principle of our Constitution.
We were a nation that was committed to the welfare of all people.
The reason why we're here is because we have created a lynch mob for the good, and you guys are a key part of that.
The good news is that we do have a capability, we do have a power, which through cities and state legislatures, we have a voice for the lower 80%.
We're organizers. We organize in the streets 6 days a week, so we're very, we know a lot about what the population is thinking.
We find now, we're in the midst of a presidential campaign, the issue of politics is on people's minds. Being able to speak truth in a time of crisis when most people aren't willing to do it. That and nothing else qualifies one for leadership, which is not a question of position, it's not a question of influence or money. But at the point that we've reached right now, it is a question of who's willing to tell the truth and act on it, and I think that's something that's going to give people inspiration and give us a pathway out of the crisis.
You're not going to lose your home just because this system is blowing up. we're going to protect you. That's step one. The other side of it, the Bank Protection Act part, is that we're going to protect the banking system. Not that we're going to protect institutions necessarily, but we're going to protect the essential banking functions upon which the economy depends. That you can't have a functioning economy without some sort of an effective banking system, but that this banking system should be a banking system and not a casino.
We must keep what these idiots with their stimulation packages have no comprehension of. What we must do is we must keep the private chartered banks functioning, as well as not evicting homeowners. So therefore you have to maintain the communities and the nation as physically functioning entities. You do that by taking federal credit is provided largely into the chartered banking system. So therefore there's always enough money in a credit system to maintain the system in its physical functions, essential physical functions. People don't die, their pensions are paid, so forth, that sort of thing. But the other thing, the other music, we don't dance to. That's simple.
To buttress this, Lyndon LaRouche has stressed the necessity of returning to a two-tiered interest rate designed to promote the growth of American manufacturing and end the control of predatory speculation over U.S. fiscal policy.
The government controls its credit. It says the government is a sovereign. The government is the only one that's allowed to utter money, currency. The government now puts control over its own money that it creates. No other money is allowed to be generated, except by treaty arrangements with other nations. So you control all the money as government money going into the system. So that money is loaned. Now, money already in the system, which goes into the form of loans through banks, will also get the same kind of implicit benefit, because now you have a 1% to 2% rate throughout the entire banking system, private and public. But the speculators are stuck out there, and they're just going to sort of dwindle on the vine, shaking dryly in the wind. And so that's the way we maintain the system, by regulation and by adjustments in these arrangements. And that will work instantly. The federal government has to guarantee the private banks, there's the chartered private banks, it has to guarantee their stability. It has to guarantee the householders living in their communities, in their homes. Those two things must be guaranteed, and some other things of the same type. So you let the rest of the stuff work itself out. Floats, interest rates go, fine, fine. But you have to maintain an international fixed exchange rate system among major nations, and you must maintain the stability of your own internal physical economy. So you're going to essentially dry out whole sections of the market which are going to have to bankrupt themselves as being useless. You're going to get rid of them. But what the concern is, you've got a population of a certain size, communities and so forth. You want to make sure that community, that population is stable. And you let the other things, which are essentially parasitical, die of their own logic. So you have two credits. On the basis of that, by freeing government, the government operation and government credit, from this high-priced credit, private credit, what you do is you essentially create a fixed exchange rate system in the world. Now you create a system where nations, their currency values are fixed with respect to each other. So you put a lid on inflation. Now you can make long-term credit, because if the rate of interest is fluctuating because of inflation, you cannot engage in long-term investments. And we need a lot of long-term investments, physical investments, to save the world. So you need a two-tier credit system. And that's the way we used to run things. We ran that. The United States had a two-tier credit system.
The first tier is for productive activities. If we are, at the root of our problem is a physical economic collapse. That's more important than the financial side of it. The fact that our industry has collapsed, that we don't produce things anymore, that we've been living off of our infrastructure, we've been cannibalizing our economy. Okay, you know, if you look at the triple curve, the lower curve, the upper curves, the money curves can go up, you know, hundreds of percent, thousands of percent. The bottom curve can only fall 100%. But that